Before I ask questions, I want to make it clear that I support the objectives of this discussion draft. I think that it's important that Russia understand that if it interferes with our elections, they'll suffer serious consequences. However, I do have some concerns about the specific proposals in the discussion draft. The first question I've got for the panel is, how exposed are U.S. banks and asset managers to Russian sovereign debt? Does anybody want to handle that?
Well, the estimates are that foreign investors own about 20 to 30% of Russia's ruble-denominated debt. That's the bulk of what Russia issues. I think we can assume that most of that foreign-owned debt is held by U.S. investors.
Do you believe that if we enact this bill, that one of the outcomes could be a default on U.S. creditors, and what would that do to the debt markets in the United States?
No, I don't think that's a serious concern. If we look at Russia's holdings of U.S. treasuries, for example, they sold about 90% of those holdings last year. Even before they sold those holdings, Russia was only the 15th largest holder of treasuries. We've had much bigger owners of U.S. treasuries sell in much larger size, China in particular, in 2015 and 2016, and the effects on the U.S. treasury market were negligible.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the U.S. fossil fuel production and energy security. Under the draft, Russian interference in elections would trigger tough new sanctions, including restrictions on any new investment in Russia's energy sector. If you want to punish Russia, I think that's a really good place to inflict pain for Russia. Russia's ranked second in natural gas production, third in oil. The United States is now the top producer in both categories. And Congress has witnessed a lot of debate about energy policy, some pushing for divestment of all fossil fuel sources. I have a simple question. Has the shale revolution in the United States energy production made it easier or harder for the United States to impose energy-related sanctions on countries like Russia?
Congressman, I'd like to speak to this question. I think there is a perception that because the United States is a bigger producer and indeed now exporter, and that this contributes more meaningfully to the U.S. balance of trade and our economy, that we are in a position to impose energy sanctions, cut off supply elsewhere in the world because the United States is more secure or it's adding more supply and can therefore substitute for other in the market. Though there is an attractiveness in thinking that way, that obfuscates the actual vulnerability we nevertheless feel, which is tremendous for every consumer of energy products, which includes everyone who drives a car and who uses diesel for their vehicle or gasoline otherwise, that if there is volatility in the market that we impose, we ourselves will be faced with that as well. And so I think we should carefully resist the notion that just because we are in a stronger economic position as a bigger producer, we therefore insulate ourselves from market volatility. We do not.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr.
If I could just add on to that, though, I do think that targeting new investments in the energy sector, whether it's in Arctic, deep water, unconventional, or in conventional, will impose pain without having a price shock in the near term. And so that's probably a more advantageous way to go than trying to limit supply in the near term.
Thank you. Mr. Carpenter, in your testimony under the subtitle, Meaning What We Say and Do, you talked about lack of coherent message on Russia and talked about this administration and the G8. And every testimony, I think, stated that sanctions are stronger when they're imposed by a coalition of allies. Do you believe our partners in Europe have been clear about their views on Russian aggression?
So I think our partners in Europe it's remarkable that they've stood with us for as long as they have. I think that's a very tenuous coalition right now. You have a number of countries, including principally Hungary, Italy, Austria, that are very weak on Russia, that have embraced Mr. Putin and have complained very vocally about the impact of sanctions on their economies, whether that's true or not. And so we're right now almost at the end of the rope, I think, as far as European cohesion goes. on
Doctor,
this
I'm going to
topic.
cut you off because I want the last two gentlemen to be able to get their
Thank you. I yield back.
questions in. Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Mr. Gottheimer from New Jersey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Terrorist groups like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza are well known for firing rockets and digging terror tunnels into Israel and using Gazans, including women and children,